the Ace of Discs is actually one of the most symbolism-rich cards in the entire deck. And part of the reason for this is that Crowley believed that in many tarot decks, the Ace of Pentacles, or the Ace of Discs, didn't go nearly far enough to actually express what this card means, and furthermore, they had the Earth as a passive thing of which we exist on, where Crowley wanted to show the Earth as a living thing itself, and so that's why this card is just full of so much symbolism. The Rider-Waite card, of course, is much, much more simple, and yet it still does show something of that green earth growing upwards and continuing to flourish, inspired by this disc, of which, of course, comes from up on high, Kether, and represents all of the elements put together there in the pentagram. So everything's coming there into the world of making, the world of actual manifestation. And that's what we see as well. On the Tree of Life, it's Kether, and here specifically, it's Kether in the world of Isaiah. And so it's the world of making, such as what we've seen. And perhaps one of the best ways of looking at this card, and in fact all of the Ace cards in some respect, but especially this one, is to imagine it as a blueprint and a diagram of a seed of life, which is Kether, of course. That's the crown and the origin point of everything. And so all the symbols upon this card are that diagram of a seed. And so when we look at this card, first of all, it's completely symmetrical, both on an X and Y axis. And this shows, of course, a duality and a polarity, especially that of male and female coming together, which of course is an act of creation, which we shall come back to much more in depth later on in this video. But the card itself, of course, is very green, and it's also got this yellow, which is the sun, and these browns and earthy colours. It is clearly a card of the green earth and the spring, you know, the shooting up of buds and the life in the green forests and mountains and jungles and so on. It really does show the earth as alive, which is what Crowley wanted to show on this, that it's not just that we exist on the earth, but that the earth itself lives as well. And so perhaps to understand it helps us to understand ourselves. Now, in the background of the card are these really beautiful looking wings, and there's actually 6 sets of wings, although they can be quite difficult to see because it is suggested that there are wings underneath the ones of which we can see as well. And this is because here we see the bringing in of life onto the earth. So it looks like these wings have been laid on top of the green earth, these angel wings. So it's the bringing in of life from source. Life has actually started on the earth, which is deep mystery in itself. We don't really know how life actually came onto earth. And yet, because there are 6 sets of wings there, that is the number of the sun and the number of Tifereth. And so life is in some way dependent upon the power of the sun, which of course is something that we all know, that we do for harvest and for the growing of crops, and even just for us to actually live requires the sun to be there. And this is true for all life, and we can see on the wings that they are actually formed rather wonderfully out of foliage and tree leaves. And this shows yet again the earth as actually alive, as well as the growth of trees and plants and flowers in accordance with the sun, such as what we see with photosynthesis and things such as that. And we can also see this suggestion of growth very strongly here, in that in the centre of the card is this earthy pattern of which represents the rings of bark or tree rings. And so of course this suggests an endless growth as well as a maturity. If we see these ancient trees of which have been around since day one, it's tempting to think about them as having witnessed all of human history right back from when they were a small sapling. And so this shows a constant growth upon the earth. And of course this is what we see with the discs cards. It's about abundance and a very physical and practical abundance and that growth of the wealth of the world, and of course the beauty of it therein. And leading on from this, we can also see an acorn up on this card. In fact, quite a few acorns, and of course these are, in one respect, a fertility, an ability to grow from a small seed into a wonderful oak tree, and is also a symbol of prosperity, and prosperity to come, because we are on the ace of discs. The prosperity is actually still to come. They also are rather strange because it's believed that before the development of agriculture, human hunter-gatherers may have actually fed themselves on various seeds, as we know, and also part of that would have actually been the acorn. There has been evidence found of that, and so it sets up that whole frame of the acorn and the oak tree that comes from it being a literal tree of life. It literally sustained the life through the consummation of it and the use of the wood for fires and tools and things like that. And of course, a tree of life, such as what we see in Norse mythology with Yggdrasil and in all the types of mythology, is literally what we've got here. We have the rings through the tree, the growth of the tree, which dies, or at least apparently dies, in the winter and comes back in the summer. A constant cycling of life and death and rebirth. And that of course brings us to this central symbol on the card, and this is where it gets really quite strange. So this here has all manner of different symbols in it, and this is why I said it was a bit like a seed, because this shows a cell, and it's a cell dividing and, most importantly, turning around. You can see these spokes in the pattern showing that it's not meant to be still, it's meant to be spinning and whirling, and so it's mimicking the passage of stars in the universe and in the microcosm, DNA and electrons and things like that, and so it's literally showing the building blocks of reality. And so this is a plant cell right in the centre of where that wood is inside the tree. It's the soul, if you like, of the tree itself. Now, around the edges of this disc is the lettering 2 Mega Ophion, and this is deeply esoteric. It refers to an ancient creation myth of the god Ophion, a serpent god, and the goddess Eurynome, of whom ruled the universe until they were taken over by things like Kronos and the Titans, so time and death and war. But for a time they ruled the whole world. It's a creation myth where they dance upon the waves, and this celestial egg, which is the Orphic egg, is fertilised by this Ophion serpent coiling around it, and so of course it's a sexual unity. In some versions of the story, Ophion becomes too big for his boots. He claims that he has actually created the whole world on his own without the need for the goddess, and is then cast into the underworld. So this idea of a wonderful ruling of the earth and then something coming and bringing death and time to it is something that I'm sure we've heard before. There are definitely biblical connotations to this, and Crowley was well aware of this, because we see this with the serpent, of course, in Genesis, and the bringing of nakedness and death to them, and this of course completes the cycle of creation and the life of man. They would have to go out and multiply to keep them alive, otherwise they would die. Rather interestingly as well, from this perspective of life beginning on earth, of course this is a creation story, after this fall of Adam and Eve, the Bible says that they were given coats of skin by God to wear, and some have interpreted this as like aprons or coats for them to wear, but that's not actually it. What it's referring to is their actual physical bodies. So they were like Ophion and the goddess there, a pure spirit ruling the earth, and then they were taken over by time and death, and they inhabited these physical bodies. They were given coats of skin, and these coats of skin age and die, and they must be constantly recycled with, of course, a sexual unity and a passing forth of those genes and those cells, which is actually what this centre shows. And so, just like the serpent shedding its skin, it's showing an endless death and rebirth, and the idea that of putting one's roots into the earth and keeping them going and keeping growth going. And so we see that as well all over this symbol. There's a decagram, or a 10-pointed figure, of which is formed by 2 7-pointed stars. So the 10 obviously is Malkuth. It's the physical world that we're in, that physical realms of which are ruled by time and things like that. And the 7-pointed stars are the Star of Babylon, of which we see, of course, in Thelema and in lots of Crowley's writings, and we saw this goddess Babylon over on the Lust card. And interestingly enough here, the phrase "to meta Ophion," which we've just seen, appears in Crowley's writings as related to this Lust card as well. And it's all to do with a coming together and a polarity of male and female energies, which of course pass on those genes and those cells and literally create the growth of the race from however life began to literally where we are at this point now. And so we can see that that 7-pointed star is the womb, and in the centre of it is this shape of which is clearly a phallic symbol, and that's literally inside there, so it's impregnating this cell, this soul in the centre of everything. And the shape itself, as well as a clear phallus, is actually formed out of a symbol of the sun, and underneath it a symbol of the moon, and so it's showing there a divine eclipse, if you like, a divine coming together of those two polar opposites. And we can also see inside this is a point, a singular point, which is shown as the symbol of the sun, and yet could also be the number 1. Underneath there is the letters 666, the so-called number of the beast. This shows, of course, the divine creative impulse, the impulse to actually go out and do this, impregnating of the world, which doesn't have to be physically sexual. It can be bringing any manifestation into creation. And so 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. 1 plus 8, which is your 18, is 9. That's that powerful esoteric number, divine consciousness and all these wonderful things. And that is going to be the beast, of which we see in Crowley's writings, and is also here the masculine element. The 666 plus the 1, of which we saw there on the top of the symbol, of course would be 667, and this represents the Lust card again, or the Scarlet Woman, if we're looking at Crowley's writings, and is the feminine, and so we've got them both together, the 666 and the 667. You could also interpret this even further, in that if we look at an outfolded cube, of which forms that shape of the cross, it could be lettered as 1 to 6, so we have the 6 there as the outfolded crucifix, of which is the outer senses, the physical world, which, since it's a crucifix, is that physical world ruled by time and death. The 7, the divine feminine, would be the cube folded back up into a cube, and it has a hidden number 7, so it's 6 sides, and the inside of it would be a hidden inner spiritual truth, which is that womb of creation. And of course they've both come together there to form that bringing in and birth of whatever it actually may be. There's a maturity to this card, of course, as we've seen with the tree rings, and Crowley actually wanted this to show a connection with nature as well, and a bringing out of our understanding of things, because the discs cards are going to be concerned with that seed of wealth and that coming in of all sorts of abundance. We're faced with religions and certain political ideologies that say that we shouldn't have wealth, or it's the root of evil and all this type of thing. It's all hogwash. It's all part of the experiences of life and all of the wonders that we can have. And same with that sexual unity, it's coming together, it's very wonderful and creates life. It's asking us to be mature with it. We go back to this to meta Ophion symbol, when Ophion believed that he had created the world himself. For instance, he was cast out into the underworld. And so it's showing that we shouldn't be ruled by these physical things. but that we should use them instead to plant seeds, of which will allow us to grow in a constructive way and in a practical way. These cards are very practical, the disc cards, and so the Orphean symbol there in the centre is showing that with our connection to the earth, with our bringing in of wealth, and with all of these dualities of male and female and all this type of thing, we can be completely free to enjoy them and to amass them in great quantities, as long as we are using them, of course, in harmony with nature and that type of thing. And that's actually, believe it or not, what Crowley wanted to show with this. He wanted to talk about our relationship with nature, and by understanding nature we also understand ourselves, and that's what the symbols on this card actually show, as well as simply being a new beginning, as it is an ace card. It could be a new business venture, for example, although it might not be quite making money at the moment. It will be soon, because you've planted the seed, and there will be all sorts of growth and abundance to come.